from West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following.
AARP West Virginia, your ally for real possibilities in the Mountain State. Online at aarp.org/WV. West Virginia University. Online at wvu.edu.
At the Legislature today, members of both the House and Senate put their respective budget bills to a vote with just 3 days left in this regular legislative session. Governor Justice announces he'll extend the regular session by just 1 day, giving lawmakers time to work on those budget plans and come to an agreement. And we meet the leader of the state's Chamber of Commerce, who is backing a plan to increase taxes on businesses to balance the 2018 budget. Those stories and more coming up on the Legislature today. Good evening, I'm Ashton Mara. Members of the House have approved a tax reform bill that leadership says is crucial to balancing their 2018 budget. As passed by the Senate, the bill swiped about $12 million in sales tax revenues that typically go to the state road fund for legislative appropriation in the general revenue budget. But it's been drastically changed since and now pulls about $140 million in new revenues into the House budget plan. Liz McCormick reports.
Senate Bill 484 was up for passage in the House today. Originally, the bill would have just captured some $12 million a year that goes into the state road fund. But while it still contains the provision, it's been transformed into what House leadership is calling a tax reform measure. The House Finance Committee amendment looks to broaden the base of taxable goods and services, like on cell phones or personal services, while also lowering the overall rate. The bill would require that by July 2018, the state's current 6% sales tax would be reduced to 5.5%, then to 5.25% in July 2019. Over time, if the fiscal climate is favorable in the state, the tax rate could be lowered to as low as 4.75%. Delegates debated the bill on the floor today.
We're nickel and diming every consumer in the state of West Virginia because all these get passed through. There are better ways to raise revenue than this. But to say that it's a tax cut by bringing taxing everything and then lowering the rate, having people going paying 0 to 6% on every little item that there is, and you're going to go home and tell that's a tax cut, good luck to you.
Everybody's talking about taxes on people. Well, this broad debate is about the best thing we've come up with for a while, from what I see. Last year, everyone that was in here last year voted for a cigarette tax. That's singling out a group. So don't talk to me about you know, we got to take care of this one or that one or whatever. That's singling out a group. Boy, you're going to go after beer tax and soda tax? I mean, that's not fair. This is a fair deal.
It's tax relief for the people of West Virginia. It does capture revenue in the short term. It is very quickly, within 2 short years, revenue neutral, as the rate is lowered for everyone on every purchase point of sale that's taxed. And then for another 2 years, the rate drops all the way down to 4.75. Imagine that. Imagine the growth our border counties could see if we have a competitive advantage at a tax rate of 4.75, considerably lower than all of our surrounding neighbors.
Instead of adding in attorneys and accountants and ad advertising agency executives and real estate appraisals, we didn't go after those folks. We are expanding to barbers and beauticians. So why should barbers and beauticians be the first line, the front line of who gets to pay the tax to try to balance the budget in West Virginia? I can't answer that question.
It seems like with this, when we talk about broadening the base, we're really not broadening much, because it's all the things that we're not picking up. And we seem to be disproportionately hitting the people that are at the low income and middle income level, and possibly that takes in a lot of our seniors. So it's a concern. You know, it seems like that this proposal, and I believe, we certainly need revenue measures. And I think it's well-meaning in one sense, but it fundamentally lacks fairness.
So we have a plan. This plan is SOT, save our taxpayers. If we truly hope to change the structural deficiencies in our budget, we must reform our tax structure. By the second fiscal year after implementing this bill, we will have totally offset any revenue captured, and we will actually cut taxes for struggling West Virginians.
After nearly 2 hours of debate, Senate Bill 484 passed 52-48. House Finance Chair Delegate Eric Nelson says Senate Bill 484 is a big part of the House's budget plan for 2018. It brings in some $140 million in new revenue for next fiscal year. The House's budget bill, House Bill 2018, also cuts state government by about $75 million. It does things like eliminating the Department of Education and the Arts, the Office of Economic Opportunity, and the Occupational Safety and Health Fund. The budget does, however, give a pay raise to classroom teachers, completely funds Medicaid, and avoids deep cuts to higher education. Nelson says he hopes the Senate will support the House's budget bill because it's balanced and reasonable.
When we're this late in this session, there's only a couple of areas that you can go to balance a budget. Unfortunately, one of those is higher ed. Another one is our health care. Going into our Medicaid line, which has federal matches. And then the third is looking to our rainy day fund, our savings account, if you will. This budget that's coming out of the House will not have any of those one-time monies and will not be going in with drastic cuts to, I think, some of those constituent areas that are very important.
Governor Jim Justice has already spoken out against the tax reform measure that the House's budget bill is based on. Justice says he wants a balanced approach that cuts government and increases the burden on not just the taxpayers, but also the business community. For the Legislature Today, I'm Liz McCormick in the House.
Members of the House are on the floor this evening debating that budget bill. And senators also put their budget bill to a vote today, but unlike the House, their spending plan doesn't contain any new revenue. The bill relies on the passage of a measure to cut public school spending by almost $80 million, replacing the revenue by increasing property taxes at the local level. It maintains the 2% across-the-board cuts to many state agencies implemented by former Governor Earl Ray Tomblin in November. But it also cuts the Department of Health and Human Resources by almost 4%, higher education by $50 million, and zeroes out some state agencies and programs, including West Virginia Public Broadcasting. Republican members of the chamber argued on the floor today that the Senate budget does exactly what the people of West Virginia want. It forces the state to live within its means. But Democrats argue it does nothing but hurt the West Virginians that need help the most. Here's a look at some of the debate in the Senate today.
To all my good friends, and I know you guys think you're doing what's right and what's best, but you know what? If this budget gets out, you might just own this budget. The expected.
In years past, all these budget lines were created gambling that we would be able to afford it in the future. Those gambles were made and they were lost. There's many things that we're having to cut that is terrible, but it was luxury items that was added to our budget in years past that probably some more thought should have been put into.
At this point, it's just a matter of the constraint of the numbers. That's it. I can't say anything else. You could ask me about any myriad of cuts that I've just heard you all describe that are painful. I don't disagree with that at all, and pretty draconian. I don't disagree with that, but I'm under at least looking at the numbers and deciding where we go from here. That's why I said this is not the final destination, and I know it's not a pretty picture to make it the Senate budget.
But the process is, this is not the Senate budget, this is the Senate Majority Leader's budget. From what I understand, it was not the chairman of the Finance Committee that worked on the budget. He was circumvented, and this ends up in our lap. It hurts children, it hurts seniors, It hurts providers. It hurts the disability community, our most vulnerable community. Mr. President, I've been here a long time. I've never seen a budget so cruel.
It's about the working people, the people that pay the taxes. We in this chamber have all been part of the budget process with the votes that we've made on the various issues this year. It's normal. The only thing that's not normal about this is that we're trying to get the budget done earlier this year than other years.
I've heard many people say that their constituents sent them here to put no more burden on them. And to suggest that this is what this budget does is just a joke. This budget relies on $80 million in property tax increases. So to suggest that we're not putting any more burden on people with this budget is ridiculous. And to suggest that someone who loses their Medicaid coverage or loses their services under IDD waiver program is not burdened is false. Or to suggest that someone who's working hard to send their kid to Marshall or WVU or Glenville State who gets a 10% increase in their tuition bill and that's not going to burden them is just not true. This budget, I mean, I know it's difficult. This is a difficult budget to put together, but to suggest that this budget is not going to impose any additional burdens on our constituents is just putting our head in the sand.
Ladies and gentlemen, this budget represents a choice. It's not an easy choice, but I believe it's the right choice. It's been said by the senator from Morgan, we live within our means. Nobody likes to do that. All of us want to live beyond our means. And as the senator, my good friend, senior senator from the 17th suggested, this budget does impose some burdens. Either way we do it, right? Whether we raise taxes or try to live within our means. We could make the argument that we could spend more. We could continue to spend more and it would alleviate the pain and suffering of more people. Where do we stop as a society? We have to control the spending.
The Senate approved its budget on a 20-14 vote with 2 Republicans, Senators Mike Maroney and Jeff Mullins, joining Democrats to oppose it. Meanwhile, Governor Jim Justice has signed a proclamation to extend the regular session by 1 day, allowing lawmakers more time to come to a budget agreement. In a press conference at the Capitol today, Justice said he was disappointed that a budget compromise hadn't already been reached.
We're not going to get a budget, or we're surely not going to get a budget that has any sense to it. The budgets that are proposed by the House and the Senate both are budgets that will hurt our state, slow us down more, and absolutely without a question will hurt a lot of people. Now let me just say this. Today, I'm signing a proclamation extending the session. The worst words that I thought I would never have to say. Extending the session. 60 days we have to get this job done. And just look where we're going. We're going nowhere, absolutely nowhere. So I'm extending the session for 1 day. And the reason I'm extending it for 1 day is because in 1 day, we ought to be able to get everything done. In regard to this budget, everything. And why should the people pay more money for us to be here when we've been here for 60 days? Why?
In recent weeks, Governor Justice has pushed what he calls a 4-pronged approach to balancing the 2018 budget. It includes increasing taxes on the average West Virginian, cutting government, increasing taxes on the wealthy, and creating a new tax on business. Our guest tonight has supported that final prong of the approach. Steve Roberts is the president of the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for being here this evening.
Ashton, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be with you.
Now, the governor is pushing what he's calling a commercial activities tax, or a CAT tax. Why don't we start with that? What is that? What does that mean?
This would simply be a tax on the gross receipts of most businesses in West Virginia. The governor outlined his ideas about a gross receipts tax or commercial activity tax in his State of the State address. And at that time, we were somewhat critical because we thought the number was too high. That number has come down very substantially. And our belief is that the employer community is going to play a role in helping to solve the problems that confront us in West Virginia. We have a budget, a tax, a revenue problem in West Virginia, the likes of which we haven't seen in close to 30 years. So it's, in many respects, it's a once-in-a-generation kind of problem. We know business will be, in some manner or form, called on to help solve that revenue problem. And after working with a large committee of tax experts, listening to employers around the state, within our membership at the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce, we have companies that employ over half of our state's workforce. We've heard from the businesses that they think that, having looked at the various measures that have been offered, the commercial activities tax at the much lower rate is a better tax and a better way to go.
That tax rate that Governor Justice has proposed here just in the past couple weeks since he lowered it is 0.45%. And he says that'll come up with about $45 million to help balance the budget. But he's also called this a temporary measure. Does the Chamber of Commerce need a sunset provision in that tax in order to support it?
Well, the temporary measure makes the governor's idea much more compelling, because if we're looking at a tax that is a 2 or possibly, and more likely a 3-year, but could be a 2-year tax, then we know that it goes away. We know that it is spread broadly. Everybody gets taxed at the same rate. Everybody pretty much understands what this is all about. And what we think it also does is that it doesn't single out a particular industry or consumer product for an additional tax. So we kind of like the low number, we like the temporary nature of it, and we like the fact that it doesn't single out a particular industry and is applied broadly across the spectrum. Obviously, we wish we were talking about no new tax, but no new tax would mean that essential state services are on the chopping block, and the employer community that we hear from values what we get from higher education, values what we get from public education, values the healthcare services, wants roads and highways to drive across, wants our bridges to be safe, and recognizes that there has to be a meeting in the middle.
Now, should the legislature decide to go through and implement this tax at some point, it's not contained in either of the budget proposals that we talked about just a little bit ago that have been presented right now, but should the legislature come back and decide that they're going to go through with this, is there any worry from the chamber that that hurts competition, that it makes other states seem more attractive to business than West Virginia?
Well, one of the things that we've done in West Virginia is that over the last 6 or 7 years, we've actually lowered business taxes to the point that they have become very competitive. Remember, we completely did away with the business franchise tax, and we lowered the corporate net income tax rate from 9% to 6.5%. So the truth is, we're sitting here knowing that over the last 6, 7, 8 years, businesses had an important tax reduction in West Virginia. So we like the idea. We know we're in a crisis. We know that business is going to be called on to make some contribution. We'd rather be in on making the solution than having a more draconian solution foisted on us. And we think that the temporary nature means that businesses can understand this. And from our point of view, from the people we've heard from, they would much rather have the tax that we're talking about, the commercial activities tax, than some of the other ideas that have been discussed. One of the taxes that was considered today may raise business taxes by substantially more than the $45 million that the commercial activity tax would raise. So that's one of the things that so many employers are looking at.
Well, you're talking about the House plan, which looks to, get rid of some exemptions in the state sales tax in order to, down the road, lower the actual rate of the overall sales tax in general. bill. And so the chamber is not a fan of that plan.
Well, we've heard from numerous employers today who have called us and said, gosh, we've begun to do the numbers on this tax, and we realize this is going to really have an impact on production in our particular facility. This is a tax we really will feel, and we're very concerned about it. We haven't heard from everybody, obviously, but we've heard from a number, and the concern we think is very real, and we're also concerned about the ability of business to sort of plan for and absorb these kinds of changes in the tax code. One of the things that business values most is predictability and stability, because business makes its plans and it wants its plan to work. And when the tax code gets changed rather substantially, that makes businesses uncomfortable. And they understand the commercial activities tax because we had it in West Virginia up through the majority of the 1980s. I remember when we did away with it. I was a proponent of doing away with it, and I hope we can do away with it in the future. But the governor has said, look, this is a temporary measure to get us through this troubled time. Let me, if I may, very quickly say, just today it's been reported that tax revenues came in March well ahead of estimates. They had also come in February well ahead of estimates. And we've had a net gain in jobs in West Virginia. It started in May of 2016. It has accelerated. January was a good month for job and employment increase. February was a good month for job and employment increase. And within about 10 days, we'll know how March came in. Nationally, we've seen that March was a very good month. We think that could be the case in West Virginia as well.
Steve Roberts, president of the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
The lobbying group Protect West Virginia and its partners gathered on the Capitol steps this morning to denounce the legislature's budget proposals, arguing that they would be, quote, disastrous for West Virginia families, businesses, and communities. Samantha Godby reports.
And we will not accept any budget proposal that mortgages the future of our state and hands this problem over to the next generation.
That was Stephen Smith, a representative of Protect West Virginia. He and other protesters were speaking out against budget bills currently working through the House and the Senate. Special education teacher Amanda Shelton says her Clay County school operates on the bare minimum right now.
I hope that they recognize that when we don't properly fund education, then we're not looking at our future. I don't think our legislature right now is looking at the long game.
The Senate proposal would reduce state K-12 education funds by more than $79 million. As a WVU student who graduated from Herbert Hoover High School, Garrett Burgess says he is a product of the West Virginia education system all the way through, and that these cuts just wouldn't make sense for the future of the state.
In West Virginia, we say we value opportunities for all. Yet the sentiment has not been shared in the halls of this legislature.
He says that since 2008, higher education funding has been reduced by $130 million, and tuition in the state has gone up by 147% since 2002.
Investing in higher education rather than cutting it is a way West Virginia can ensure a better future and more opportunities for its people.
Shelton agrees.
We don't have an educated workforce right now. Companies do not want to come here.
Protect West Virginia's concerns about the budget don't stop with education. The group says the cuts would also affect senior citizens. The Protect West Virginia campaign advocates for many of the tax increases and revenue proposals provided by the governor, including the sugary beverage tax and increased tobacco taxes. Both of those taxes have met resistance in the House and the Senate. For the Legislature Today, I'm Samantha Godby at the State House.
Tomorrow on our show, Governor Jim Justice will join us to discuss the budget plans making their way through both the House and Senate. Justice has said he will veto a bill that relies too heavily on cuts to government. We'll also discuss the governor's education and infrastructure plans that have stalled in the final days of this session. And on Friday, the Legislature Today will be coming to you live from the Capitol Rotunda. The special hour-long show begins at 6 p.m. and will feature interviews with lawmakers and interest groups who are following several bills still being worked through the legislative process. On Saturday, we'll also be bringing you live coverage of Day 60. Join us on the West Virginia channel Saturday morning at 11 a.m., where we'll bring you the House and Senate floor sessions. Then at 8 p.m. on both the West Virginia channel and our main public broadcasting channel, we'll bring you the final hours of the session, following lawmakers until their midnight deadline. That's Saturday on West Virginia Public Broadcasting and the West Virginia channel. For now, this has been the Legislature Today. I'm Ashton Mara. Thanks for joining us.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following.
AARP West Virginia, your ally for real possibilities in the Mountain State. Online at aarp.org/WV. West Virginia University. Online at wvu.edu. From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.